Okay, folks, we'll get cracking. So, hi everyone, welcome to Defeating Dark Patterns. I'm Simon Keane, Director of Design at Ethyca, and my co-presenter for today is Kelly Huang, VP of Product at Ethyca. So, firstly, a little bit of context around the origins of dark patterns. If you've spent some time shopping in supermarkets, you will have inadvertently come across dark patterns, but in the physical space rather than in the digital space. You take a trip through any supermarket, and you might not necessarily realize you're taking part in a cleverly choreographed dance routine through the aisles, shrewdly defined by our consumer shopping trends, purchasing psychology, and on-the-ground data gathered over decades. You walk down one aisle looking for bread, and you end up leaving with pastries, freshly squeezed orange juice, and some random tasty snacks. You're standing in a queue at the checkout, and you pick up a magazine and some fizzy drinks that you had absolutely no intention of purchasing when you went in. In summary, you arrived at the store with very specific needs, and yet somehow here you are at the checkout, facing an extra $20 bill of items you really didn't need or want when you were rigorously planning your weekly shop. So before the term dark patterns originated in 2010 by Dr. Harry Brignall, a specialist in product design, user experience, and user research, there were already mystical dark forces at play that were coercing you into making purchasing decisions you really had no intention of making. As Dr. Jen King cleverly put it recently, once you physically walked out of the store, you would never find someone sneaking up behind you and placing items into your shopping bag. So when we talk about dark patterns, what are we referring to exactly in the context of technology and the current data-driven landscape? Today in this interactive session, we're going to take a quick walk through the history of scholarship on dark patterns, and then my colleague Kelly will explore, with contributions from some of you hopefully, how some of them are being applied to data privacy experiences today. If we're successful, you'll leave with a renewed appreciation for the countless considerations that go into building a respectful experience for privacy and beyond. So the whole premise of dark patterns is, as Dr. Brignall phrased it, when you use the web, you don't read every word on every page. You skim read and make assumptions. And if a company wants to trick you into doing something, they can take advantage of this by making you think it's saying one thing, when in fact it's saying another. The term dark patterns, as defined by Dr. Brignall, is a user interface that has been carefully crafted to trick users into doing things. They are not mistakes. They are carefully crafted with a solid understanding of human psychology, and they do not have the user's interests in mind. In a previous role, I was lucky or unlucky enough to have witnessed firsthand the dawn of the General Data Protection Act, or the GDPR in the EU, and the challenges that every organization or client I had at the time faced in the years ahead. It was early 2018, GDPR was coming down the tracks fast, and I think it's fair to say nobody was really prepared for the impact it was about to have on their existing processes, systems, and ways of working. Beyond all of the vast technical challenges in their underlying systems, how they stored and managed users' personal data, the most pressing challenges they faced on the front end to demonstrate, at least on the face of it, some strides towards compliance, was making sure all of their marketing activities online stopped automatically opting their users into various brand materials, newsletters, offers, and discounts, etc. Before that, the dawn of digital marketing was a compliance-free landscape where banner ads used every form of dark pattern you could possibly imagine, trying to entice users to click on their banner ads. Advertisers used every trick in the book to get users to sign up to their brand's monthly newsletters, competitions, giveaways, whatever it took back then for marketeers to raise their engagement figures, they did it. So whilst we all endured months of pain trying to navigate this new legislation, being some of the earliest adopters of this new EU regulation meant designing compliant consent forms that spoke in plain English with clear messaging, unchecked opt-ins by default, and supported data protection impact assessments, or DPIAs, for every campaign or online activity we activated. These challenging months were the start of things to come and have been a strong force for good to implement legislation and have a positive impact for good on the future design of dark patterns. So why is this important now? Well, as mentioned, dark patterns were first given a name in 2010. It has taken a decade, but now in 2021, legislators are starting to get to grips with the phenomenon and are trying to curb its prevalence. The issue of dark patterns has become so pervasive that a bill has been introduced recently that would prohibit large online platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and Google from using dark patterns to trick users into handing over their personal data. It's called the Detour Act, which stands for Deceptive Experiences to Online Users Reduction. This act bans platforms from designing, modifying, or manipulating users into making educated decisions, forbidding them from designing user interfaces that manipulate users into consenting to give their personal data. This includes not running any design change experiments or A/B tests without the user's consent. Princeton University and the University of Chicago recently published a study of 11,000 shopping sites and found dark patterns on more than 11% of them, including major retailers, demonstrating the sheer scale of dark pattern activity across the web. They found that the more popular the website, the more likely it was to feature dark patterns on the website. We'll get to the reasons behind that shortly. The paper concludes that the prevalence of dark patterns online is definitely harmful to people. In fact, it has the potential to harm more than just their wallets. Dark patterns clearly undermine consumer privacy and exploit people by robbing them of their ability to critically think of their actions. To give you a real-world example, as I wrote this presentation, I was the victim of a dark pattern myself, which saw me paying out $210 more than I had expected to pay online, purchasing educational hardware for my daughter's new school year, preying on parents' guilty conscience that if they didn't purchase everything that's thrown at them, then their child isn't going to be set up for success. So as an example that captures multiple dark patterns in one checkout flow, I thought a quick walkthrough might be interesting. The context for this: my daughter is starting in a new school. She requires new learning materials, in this case, a mandatory iPad. The process starts with an email from the school with a link to the chosen hardware supplier. So the first step is to click the email link, proceed to step 1 on the e-commerce site, and select the iPad. It's okay so far. I have to choose a case. Again, not too bad, as I still have the option to bring my own case. So I'll choose that and I'll move on to the next step. Again, this is fine. They're offering me insurance, but it's deselected and there's no shaming messages visible if I choose to move on to the next section. So I continue to the next section without selecting insurance. And so it begins. Mobile device management, 3-year license, defaulted to selected. Junior cycle, digital technology training support, defaulted to selected. And while I can't demo here, there was no way to deselect them. They were locked. So that's an additional 170 odd euros added to my cart. So 2 classic dark patterns have emerged here in what's called 1, roach motel, where you get into a situation very easily, excuse me, but then you find it's hard to get out of it. For example, a premium subscription. And 2, sneak into basket, where you attempt to purchase something, but somewhere in the purchasing journey, the site sneaks an additional item into your basket. We proceed to payment. But wait, not until I get another offer for popular upgrade and try to shame me into another purchase by stating, give your child the best chance to succeed by spending another $1.99 a month. This time, dark patterns we see, the dark pattern that we see is called confirm shaming, defined as the act of guilting the user into opting into something. The option to decline is worded in such a way as to shame the user into compliance. I personally chose not to give my child the best chance to succeed, and I moved on to try and pay my bill. But here we go again, trying to purchase an additional support option on top of the 3-year support option I had already been forced to accept. Note the highlighted no button to really emphasize I should not continue without this. Here we see our next dark pattern, misdirection, defined as the design purposefully focuses your attention on one thing in order to distract your attention from another. I chose to proceed without selecting no. One last attempt to upsell much needed cleaning products and various accessories. I move on, wondering will I ever get to the checkout in this originally stated 4-step process. Here we go again. How about the ultimate digital parenting tool to help you manage your kids online? Again, back to confirm shaming for the 2nd time in this checkout flow. Finally, with one more for good measure, they throw in some misdirection again. I got there in the end. Bear in mind, all I was expecting at the start of this flow was to pay around 375 euros. So this wasn't just one dark pattern. You can clearly see how much misdirection and shaming has taken place in this one checkout flow. Do that for about 50 new students each year, multiply it out over the hundreds of schools that are mandated to use this supplier, and you start to get a sense of the scale and impact of this dark pattern. Moving on, Dr. Brignall recently presented his thoughts to the Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, referencing a research paper called Price Salience and Product Choice. In this paper, researchers worked with a ticketing website to look at the effect of hidden fees versus upfront fees. The experiment includes several million users. It's probably the largest test of dark patterns that's ever been published. They found that users who weren't shown ticket fees upfront spent about 21% more money and were 14% more likely to complete the purchase. So how have we ended up in this situation where so many retailers, to take the previous research as an example, are exploiting human psychology to such great effect? For the most part, this comes down to advances in technology and the industrialization of A/B tests that help, as Dr. Brignall said, carefully craft experiences to trick users into doing things, and to really refine and tailor their messaging and information architecture of the user interface to their required outcomes. Whilst the concept of A/B testing has been around for over 100 years, these advances in technology have made all of the difference since the early 1990s. Kaiser Fung, who founded the Applied Analytics program at Columbia University, said, it's the same core concept, but now you're doing it online in a real-time environment and on a different scale in terms of the number of participants and number of experiments. That's not to say that all A/B tests are carried out in order to find ways to deceive users, but having the ability to craft the information architecture based on very specific behavioral data certainly helps, if that's what you're setting out to achieve. It's a fine line between right and wrong, but there's absolutely no doubt about it. Technological advances have brought this level of testing to the masses, way beyond any offline consumer research function could have ever come close to. This has empowered businesses with the ability to trick and deceive their users into spending more money or sharing more personal data, which of course has a monetary value to it as well. So our goal in looking at this broad overview of the history of dark patterns is to reinforce the number of considerations and magnitude of decisions that designers are taking every day that can impact outcomes. Just as there is a high degree of intentionality, even scientific refinement, it takes an equal amount of intentionality to design truly respectful privacy experiences for users in 2021. So next, Kelly is going to take us through some of the instances in which dark patterns have been appearing in the field of privacy and privacy rights fulfillment, with a view to showing how those design considerations translate into privacy outcomes for better or for worse. Over to you, Kelly.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. And thank you so much for that informative overview on dark patterns. So now that you all have the skinny on what dark patterns are, you know how they present, how they're designed, and the reasons why they've taken such a front seat recently. But what does this look like in the wild? Today, we're going to look at some reference examples of 3 scenarios that all internet citizens are faced with when making privacy decisions: mobile tracking, the CCPA's do not sell my personal information, and the famous, nay infamous, cookie consent banner. Through each of these examples, since this is an interactive session, we want to hear from you. So I don't know if you guys can, but unmute those mics and get your chat box fingers ready. As we open up these examples, we want to get your input on the things you're seeing on the internet, in the wild, similar dark pattern instances that you may have encountered out on the internet, and why you think one design approach is better than the other. So let's use these examples as jumping off points for a wider chat on privacy UX. And to start, we're going to kick off with a softball scenario that doesn't have anything to do with privacy. But if you have been shopping at home for the last year while locked down in COVID, this is going to be a pretty familiar situation to you. So what we have is an Amazon searcher, an Amazon user that's very innocently searching for a ping pong table. Now, this user here knows exactly what type of ping pong table they want, so much so that they're searching for that ping pong table by using the name brand that they want, which is here, Hall of Games. So they're searching for this Hall of Games ping pong table, and you're seeing that they're getting results down below. Now, interestingly, and as Simon is showing here on the slide, interestingly, there is the Hall of Games ping pong table, but it's actually shown on the second row of results, as you can see in the red box. So what are we seeing here? Have you been in the situation before? Has anyone shopped on Amazon before and not found the thing that they're looking for directly in the first row of results? And you might be searching super specifically for it, but has this happened to anyone? And if so, why is this misleading, and why is this such a inconvenient experience for you? Chat box fingers, anybody? All right, this has happened to people, and we don't use Amazon maybe for this exact reason. This may have also happened on Google. This may happen anywhere that you're shopping online, but it definitely, great point tying this together, Josh. This potentially could misrepresent the inventory and drive sales to preferred vendors. And maybe what you're not seeing, because we're on this little slide here, is that those first row of results are actually from sponsored vendors that are effectively paying Amazon to be the very first row, that almost kind of top shelf approach that supermarkets take to have the things that they want you to buy directly at eye level. So it's the first thing you focus on, but it may not necessarily be the thing that you're looking to buy. So those sponsored results really are misleading to the user, and they're misdirecting, misguiding the user to do a thing, to purchase a thing that they may not necessarily be wanting to purchase. Okay. All right. So that's our softball easy example. Doesn't have to do with data privacy, but it's something that everybody, I'm sure, has had the experience with, in the wild on the internet. So going to the next example here on privacy settings. So this is a very interesting example. We all know with the advent of the iOS 14.5 updates that there are a number of changes coming to iOS and to your experience of privacy settings on your mobile device. And so here what we're looking at are 3 different examples presenting a similar privacy opt-in, opt-out concept, but presented 3 different ways across different platforms. So we have an example over on the left that's asking for access to your microphone so that they can record audio to unlock maybe a feature in the app or something. In the second example there in the center, the app is asking for permission to track your user activity across other companies' apps and websites. This may or may not necessarily be misleading to folks, but this is something that has been coming to the forefront, especially in the iOS world as of late, and their new 14.5 marketing push. And on the far right, you're seeing that the app is offering the user an opportunity to opt out of a feature, but it seems to be irreversible based on what's there. So what are you guys seeing? What's interesting about these 3 examples about opting in, opting out, and maybe what are the dark patterns here? What are some things that we're seeing here that may be misleading to a user? Asking an app not to track is very confusing. It is very confusing and misleading. And aptly noted, is the first option there in that center example. It's the first option that's on that information hierarchy is what we call that. It's the first thing the user sees. It's the first thing the eye is drawn to directly in the center of your screen. Great call out. Duolingo, passive aggressive with their marketing. I would also agree with that, but that is fortunately not the reason why they're asking for access to your microphone, but that definitely is one of the drawbacks of using some of these apps. It's not real consent if you need to say yes to access anything. Ooh, that's a meta point there, but I agree with that for sure, Kim. Yeah, exactly. Center example. Why can't we just say disallow? I mean, we could just say, allow, don't allow. Having a very interesting, different call to action there puts more cognitive load on the user to have to make that decision and interpret exactly what's there. Middle option may ask the user every time they use the app exactly, and it becomes a nuisance. It becomes really kind of unintuitive because it's asking for various things, and is the app asking to track different activity across various apps? Great call out. Consent without purpose definition cannot be consent. And actually that goes very strongly into the left example where, it's just saying, allow them to record your audio. Isn't that a little bit scary? Doesn't that force a user to have to think about what might this app be asking me for? Besides the fact that it's Duolingo, what might this app be asking me for that I may be not aware of? And also, why does it need to record my audio? Zero context. It is a very interesting concept there. Threatens the viability of the app for disallowing the feature. Yes. So it is very interesting that it's saying that if you opt out of this thing, you can never opt back in. It is completely irreversible. A very interesting concept there. And it is a concept that actually Simon was bringing up earlier about the Roach Motel. So we want to make sure that these things are well accounted for in your UX decisions. Elaboration on why ask app not to track is confusing. That's a really great call out. And why do the settings say allow apps to ask to track? What does it mean if they don't allow this? That's exactly right, Nicolette. And very interestingly, that center call to action, as you're calling out, it also gives somewhat of a small explanation as to why it's asking you to track, asking you to allow the app to track, to provide you a better and personalized ad experience. better for whom? Who is this better for? It's a very interesting, very interesting concept there. All right. I really like this. I really like this. This is great engagement. So in the tie-up here, we have a couple of these examples that everyone is so familiar across the mobile settings. We have a couple takeaways though. We want to make intentional copywriting, intentional copy. There is a real difference between presenting objective information versus confirm shaming. So we had a clear example of that in the center example in iOS 14. Additionally, we want to allow them freedom of choice and avoid the roach motel. As Simon was saying earlier, you never want to be trapped in a scenario where you're forced to make a privacy decision that you can never back out of. So if a user can opt in, allow them to opt out, and vice versa. If they've opted out, allow them to opt back in that third example that we were showing there. And then lastly, information hierarchy matters. Information hierarchy helps a user make decisions more easily. When you bring things to the top, when you allow things to be front and center in a modal or in a decision-making tree, you want the user to be able to make the decision that's right for them. So information hierarchy needs to be consideration. All right, excellent. So in our next example, we have perhaps it is or is not familiar to most folks here, but we have Oracle Data Cloud. You guys are all probably familiar with Oracle. They own a portfolio of products that span databases, marketing, data information, BI, and analytics. We have a number of things that Oracle is responsible for a number of processes across multiple enterprises, international enterprises. So what they have allowed, and rightfully so, they have allowed all of their consumers to opt out of marketing for their Oracle Data Cloud product. And so you'll find it in their privacy policy today. You can go and opt out of your consumer data privacy data sales. And so what you'll get is a page that you see there on the left where, very appealing and asking you a very clear question of want to opt out and a very clear call to action of opt out. So upon pressing that, you're then able to see that you're brought to the next page, which is a form that you see there on the right. Now, this is a pretty large form, and the large form there is having a number of different fields. It has a number of calls to action. I just want to see what you guys think about this experience here on opting out of various data sales opportunities. Is this confusing? Is this clear? I realize that the text is small, but if you can just pull up and look down at this example, what exactly are we seeing here? I am also confused if I have to provide personal information to opt out. That is very true. Do some work for Google. Yep, exactly. You're going to provide your personal information. Then you have to actually make a decision of, is this a fire hydrant or not? So you do have to confirm that you're not a robot, and then you should be able to opt out. Are you providing more information to opt out than Oracle already has? Great call out, Melanie. Oracle may not have any information on me. I might be unnecessarily, or maybe Oracle just has like a cookie on me, or they just have some UUID on me. Am I actually giving them more information in this form, letting them know my location and my email address? I mean, you never know because you have no idea what they have on you. Great call out. Why do they need the address? Are they mailing things to you? It might be a part of the Data Cloud products, but actually, I mean, actually, if you read the text there, you can actually go to their website. This is not part of the Data Cloud product. What is submit? Great call out, James. And also very sneaky to have optional fields. It goes a lot hand in hand with what Melanie mentioned, in that if you have optional fields, you might actually be giving away more information than they actually need, more information than they actually have. Which button do I press? Great call out. We have two buttons here that are of equal information hierarchy, and therefore maybe aren't necessarily, you don't know which one you want to pick. All right, so if we're going to skip 2 slides down and go to the key takeaways on this, just because we're running out of some time here, our 2 key takeaways here are to avoid competing calls to action. Just like Jeff said as our last comment there, we don't really know what to press. We have 2 buttons that say submit and one that says opt out. They're both given the same color treatment. Which one do I even click? We don't want to have competing calls to action. We want to make it clear to the user. We don't want them to have to make a harder decision than they made when they initially landed on the page. The second item here is that misdirection is a common pitfall, but sometimes it's unintentional. We have to kind of give some folks the benefit of the doubt that they just want to give the most information about their use of data and your data possible. and they're not intentionally trying to make it difficult for you to make a decision. So we want to make sure that the misdirection, we're just highly aware of it, and that we don't intentionally try to misdirect or misguide the user. All right, our last example on the infamous cookie consent banner. So here you'll see 3 different examples. We have example number 1, which is a purple cookie consent banner that actually has no buttons, nothing on it. It's just saying that by using this website, you accept that you will be having cookies put on your computer. The next item here is that you have a cookie consent banner at the bottom in the footer of a page. And no, that is not actually zoomed out. This is actually zoomed in. What you'll notice is that that white cookie consent banner has 2 buttons there at the bottom with some text there that is actually kind of difficult to read. It is in fact a consent banner for ants. It's exactly what I was thinking as well. And then your third example there is a cookie consent modal, where you land on a page and a modal is presented to the user front and center in the center of the page. That modal has the privacy settings, that has the copy, a very large chunk of copy there with a couple calls to action. You have a bright yellow button and a couple other buttons there on that modal. So what are we seeing? What do we think is maybe misleading about this experience? What do we like or dislike about any of these experiences? Let's hear it. How do you save my settings without cookies? Great question. I mean, it's a good question. How do you save settings without cookies? But also, what settings are there to save? If you're a first-time lander on this page, do you have any settings? Also, if you're going to be changing anything on here, what's the value? What are you changing? How long do I have to remain on the website for the consent to trigger? Okay. Will they let you use the site if you press do not agree? Oh, great question. Great question. It's not clear in this, and actually it doesn't explicitly say in that policy there. Does it disable them, or is it just me saying I don't like this? Great question on that as well, Bianca. Should I click that big yellow button? It's a pretty enticing yellow button. It's a very enticing yellow button, and it is something that I would love to click there because it's so bright and colorful. Imprint, great question. Don't know what imprint is. Is it important? Do I have to click it? Accept all cookies as the alternative option. To spending time looking at the cookie settings. How about just accept only required cookies? That would be great. No one has a deny button. That is very true. It's pushing a user or coercing a user through an experience. Really great feedback. And I know also there's a little bit of fatigue because I'm sure that everyone here has experienced cookie banners a number of times in a day if you're just looking at the internet. But the key takeaways here are that concise and clear copy is essential. You just saw there is sometimes just blocks of text. And, when you're first landing on a site, sometimes you don't want to read through an entire 2 paragraphs of copy. It's crazy, but, sometimes that's what your legal team might insist on you using. Additionally, clear typography, inaccessible formatting. It's something that we don't talk about nearly enough in UX design, especially in the privacy space, that there's no good in having great, concise, clear copy if it is inaccessible. Accessibility is something that I personally am passionate about, but accessibility would make that second example where you have a cookie consent banner for ants. We would basically, if we had accessible formatting, you would be able to read that in a very clear and concise way. And all that great work you did in that first bullet for making clear and concise copy would have actually gone to work there. Lastly, to go to the tune of the yellow button, we really want to make sure that we consider the user's journey here, right? We don't necessarily want to force them or coerce them through an experience. We want to make sure that they are able to be given the most amount of information to make the most informed decision that they have. And therefore, forced continuity needs to be considered. We don't necessarily want to coerce them through the primary call to action. We want to make sure that they have a positive experience having seen and understood and grokked all the information that you've presented to them today. Alrighty, we are right up at time. I really want to thank you guys for your time and engagement here today in our session on defeating dark patterns. Simon and I are here to answer any questions you have. I really like Jeff's company stance on cookie consent banners. Where can I find the slides? Slides, I believe, will be available. Slides will be available after this, I think, with the recording. If Lourdes is on or any of the moderators are on, they should know. But I think that those are all going to be on the videos after the conference. Thanks, Preeti. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Have a very good day.
See ya.